is Trevor Watkins. I am the newly elected chair of the Northeast Ohio Professional ACM chapter. For those of you that are new, like Kazim, welcome to this talk today. NEOACM is a professional chapter of the International ACM, which is the world's largest educational and scientific computing society that advances computing as a science and as a profession. NEOACM is based in Youngstown, Ohio, and for the last 10 years of our existence, we meet regularly to discuss diverse topics and function as an intellectual and geographical node of activity for both ACM members, the computing community, and the general public by offering seminars, lectures, forums, and the opportunity to meet peers and experts from many disciplines. I'm also here on behalf of George Mason University, who is a partner in both these remote talks as well as the African American and STEM speaker series, which will return next year in the spring, and we'll have a little bit more information about that. And George Mason University is now a top 10 public university for diversity, innovation, and cybersecurity education. And University Libraries is one of the co-sponsors. So this is only our second installment of our remote interviews. We hope we will be able to bring more of these 60-minute interviews of interesting individuals in robotics, computer science, software engineering, and for today's talk, AI ethics in a format we feel will be informative and entertaining to the computing society and the general public at will. So we welcome Connor, and I will hand this off to Tracy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Today we will be talking to Connor Wright. We met him a couple of years ago through the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, and he's studying to be an AI ethicist, and he is a professional ethicist. Let me make that clear. But we're going to learn more about Connor through this interview, and so I'm going to go ahead and get into this. So Connor, where were you born and raised?
Yes, I was born, welcome everyone, and great to see you here. And if you can tell by my accent, it's not quite pure English. I was born in South Africa, and I lived in Johannesburg until I was 9 years old. And then I moved over to the UK in 2008, and I have been here ever since. So 14 years now, and I try and go back every now and again when I can make it out, so sort of every 2-3 years. But then otherwise, the UK is my current home.
Okay, wonderful. So give us some idea about did you say you were born in Johannesburg?
I was born in Johannesburg, yes.
Wow. So could you talk a little bit about that as far as being raised in Johannesburg? And what year was that?
So I was born in 99, and yeah, I moved in 2008. So I had a decent amount of my childhood, and it was a long time until I spent more time in the UK than I did in South Africa. And even in those 9 years, although short and although fewer years than I spent in the UK, they were very formative years. They were very impactful on how I saw the world, how I related to other people, how I saw myself. So I was very privileged, to be honest, to have been raised there, but also became very aware of how different it was to be raised there than in the UK, and different in terms of mentality, but also in terms of physically as well. So in South Africa, and especially in Johannesburg, it's not as safe, it's not as open in terms of physical buildings where you live as the UK or perhaps the US as well. So when I was living, I lived in my home, but I had, I was surrounded by 10-foot walls. I had barbed wire, I had electric fencing, I had alarms. I had 2 big German shepherds that, if were needed, could do some damage, and that was basically because in Johannesburg it is that dangerous and warrants it, and that's what you pay for. You pay for that security, and despite that, I was burgled twice in my time there. I was luckily never engaged directly by them. So when we slept, as you finish the stairs, we had a gate that we would lock at night so that people couldn't get to our rooms.
Mhm.
And those are the kind of decisions that you have to make, and also whether you carry a gun or not in terms of self-defense. My parents swore not to. They preferred to defend themselves in different ways. But despite that, and despite the problems that were there, it was a very communal raising. So there's a great African saying where it takes a village to raise a child. So it wasn't just my parents raising me, it was also my maid, it was also my granny, it was also my aunt. And that kind of village mentality, communal mentality definitely helped me in terms of valuing and evaluating, but also just valuing in general other people's opinions and other people's inputs and having respect for others, which I've sort of tried to carry into my daily life now. And I think those
Well,
years in South Africa definitely helped with that.
you brought up your parents. What did your parents do for a living? What kind of work did they do,
Yeah,
Johannes?
so my dad is an entrepreneur. He is now retired, but he ran a tech company that did electronic billing and worked for banks. And then my mum is a chartered accountant, still working, and it was her job that brought us over here. So she got a job offer at an accounting firm in London, and my dad wanted to expand his business at the time, and therefore they made the decision to make the move.
So how old were you when you moved to the UK?
So I had just turned 9. I was about 9 and 3 days old.
Okay, so did you stay in the UK until your adult life?
Yep.
At
So
that,
I visited South Africa almost once, twice a year, but I've always been in the UK since then. So I got indefinite leave to remain. I've got a British passport as well as my South African passport now, and
okay.
I try and visit every now and again because about 80% of my family are still out in South Africa, but my nuclear family are here with me.
Okay, so what was race relations going on as far as early from that time, the short period of time that you were there in South Africa? What was race relations like?
Yeah, I mean, as a from a 0 to 9 year old, I didn't really think about race, to be honest. It wasn't something that I had to think about, fortunately, given South Africa's past. But my best friends, some of them were or had different color skin to me, and some of my best friends, I didn't see them as okay, why are you different to me? I just saw them as my friends. So one of my best friends was my maid's son, who lived with us, and he, was came from a completely different background to myself, but I was able still to enjoy my time. I was able to relate. I was able to just get to know myself through him as well, and that sort of links to my interest in Ubuntu philosophy. But we'll
Okay.
get onto that, I'm sure. So I never really saw race. I didn't see it as a problem in that sense, and I just didn't understand it. I just said, okay, I've got this color skin, you've got that color skin, but we are both humans. So as
Yeah.
long as you can chase me around and we have a good time, then and that's all that's important to me.
Okay, so when you moved to the UK and you got older, uh, how did you view that experience in South Africa? So now you're in a different culture and you get more education. Do you look back at that experience and draw some kind of conclusions about it?
Yeah, it's always marked with feeling privileged and blessed to have been able to have lived in South Africa, but also to have seen the value that it brought me living in the UK. So all the UK has done for me as well has been fantastic. The opportunities for education, meeting different people, and almost, helping me carve a future out for myself. And in South Africa, I see the blessings that it has given me in order to help me carve that future. So almost South Africa planted the seed, and then the UK allowed me to grow in that sense. So I look
Oh,
back and say completely different experience, but totally worth it.
so as you end up deciding to go into AI ethicism. What was that? How did that blossom from that diverse upbringing to deciding to go into that area?
It's a great question. And the main thing from South Africa is the appreciation for diversity. It's the appreciation for the value of the other person's view and how that can help form who you are and how that actually allows you to be who you are as well. So I think one of the biggest things I've learned from being in the space has been the importance of diversity of opinion, diversity of perspective, and not only just entertaining it, but actually valuing it has been most important for me. So I always enjoyed looking at different sides to things. I always thought there was something else behind what the given truth was in the situation. And that led me towards my love for philosophy. I loved Gray. I loved debating. I was good at it. And I enjoyed listening to the other perspective. And my favorite part of philosophy was always applied ethics. And I was in my sort of final years of high school and I wanted to study philosophy and I needed a way to try and make a career out of it rather than just being a professor or an academic. And then I saw that I could be able to look at AI and these use cases where I can actually engage in my favorite part of philosophy and apply ethical theories and look at this situation and feel like, yes, this is something that I can get my teeth stuck into. And at the moment, at times there aren't any right answers. And I think that's where I thrive. So I wanted to get into that. And also I wanted to not just die with my thoughts like some philosophers do. So I wanted to make sure I was getting some practical output. And that also allowed me to take on the transferable skills that I developed in my degree and take it on into the AI ethics realm as well.
Okay, so talk to us about this Ubuntu perspective and as far as your research, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, with pleasure. So this is a great area of interest of mine, and the main slogan is the Zulu phrase that translates to "I am because we are." So I am able to be who I am through the actions, decisions, and the space given to me by others. So it's a very relational, very communicative philosophy, and it started out as an oral philosophy. So it started out in the continent. So Ubuntu is interpreted and translated in completely different ways in different areas of the continent. But within the South African perspective and South African context, it sort of came across as I am because we are. So I am a person through other persons in that sense. And what the best thing to do with that is to say that you acknowledge the plurality of human experience. You say that I am not the only one who experiences human experience in one way, and I'm not aiming for that objective truth. I'm aiming for consensus. So given it was an oral philosophy, it was passed down through generations by word of mouth. So it wasn't written down until very late on in its development, unlike in the West with Greek philosophy, which is always written down. But as a result, discussion and the value of communicating was passed down through the generations and allowed that philosophy to continue until it was eventually committed down onto paper. So you have this oral element and this communication element at the core, and then you use this communication element to relate to others, to experience others, and to effectively walk in other people's shoes and value that. So as a result, I think it's a fantastic platform to look at human rights and digital harms in that sense. So how can we best conduct ourselves in formulating certain rights where we are able to say that this is not okay because I'm looking at this other perspective. This is not okay because just because it's okay with me doesn't mean it's okay with others. So I'm almost using the power of communication and the power of relation to see different ways around different problems. And there are different ways of interpreting what it means to exist from the Ubuntu perspective, what to value from the Ubuntu perspective. At times, it can be used as an adjective to say that someone has Ubuntu, they have that relational feeling. It can also be described as a philosophy, as an ethical framework. So it's a very multifaceted field. But at its core, it's this communication and this value for others.
Okay, so what is this about this chatbot that you want to analyze and utilize?
Yes, so it was a talk I gave, so viewing chatbots through an Ubuntu perspective, and it was at the trying to remember the name of the event now, but it was a worldwide kind of accessible conversational AI. So I think it was called the Conversational AI Summit, and it was all about conversational AI, which basically means chatbots or voice assistants, and it was for Africans. This was the African edition. Mm-hmm. So me given my South African roots, I was almost, given a ticket in, and I gave the talk on showing the value of communication and the importance of that within conversational AI by utilizing this Ubuntu perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to show that at times the anthropomorphic and aesthetic side of conversational AI is valued. So by anthropomorphic, I mean the attribution of human attributes to non-human entities. So for example, saying that the leaf decided to move, or the machine is thinking, that kind of thing. And then within the conversational AI, I focused on chatbots. And through this, I was able to say that examples such as Sam from Samsung was made with the express focus on the aesthetic side of her design. So she was made a female, she was made to look very aesthetically pleasing, but this was not valuing the communication element of this virtual assistant. And as a result, the project was lambasted with comments of misogyny and playing into the patriarchy, so it was eventually shut down. And I was using the Ubuntu perspective to show the importance of communication. So I applied it to another chatbot entity or chatbot company called Replica, where they fabricate and generate digital avatars, which you are able to customize to be how you want them to look, how you want them to say, and they're basically a 24/7 support, which is great. So it's definitely helped people with their mental health. They have a companion. And I felt that this didn't harness the communication side of conversational AI enough. So what you were doing was almost creating a digital version of yourself and bouncing off your own opinions. You weren't communicating, you weren't growing as a person. Because within the Ubuntu framework, being more human is communicating and learning and growing as that in that kind of way. So almost by relating in a human way, you are growing as a human and becoming more human in this sense, almost like a spectrum. So when you're doing this just with yourself, you're not growing. So I thought viewing this chatbot example from the Ubuntu perspective showed the value of communication and how there shouldn't just be a one-way street. There was also a South Korean chatbot called Lee Luda, who was developed to almost actually replace human relationships. She was a 20-year-old female chatbot who was meant to replace relationships and meant to be your friend. And from the Ubuntu perspective, you don't want to value certain relationships over others just for communication values. You want to value all relationships and communicate through all of these channels. So as a result,
I'm listening. My brain is just firing here. Okay, so we know here we talk about biasness and AI, but what you're talking about is utilizing that Ubuntu perspective. Now you're talking about using that bias in a completely different way. So you want to talk about that? I mean, there is always viewed that bias is something negative. But if you want to do a chat bot from a certain perspective, that is a bias, but you're bringing in something unique. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So this bias is not so much you should design the chatbot according to the Ubuntu framework. It's almost utilizing the Ubuntu framework as a way of exposing these biases. So I'm using basically Ubuntu as almost like my glasses or a magnifying glass to look at chatbots and to investigate them in that sense. To say that, listen, viewing it and using this perspective shows that this bias towards the aesthetic and this bias towards just generating a digital version of ourselves and this bias towards, creating this 20-year-old female virtual assistant that looks great is not valuing communication. It is not allowing us to grow as humans. So I'm almost using it as an investigative tool rather than a way to bring in another set of bias in that sense.
Yeah, so we also kind of view Africa in with a perspective that is not going to be very advanced in technology and AI. That's the view. Me and Cameron is working on this history, and we're really interested in Africa's contribution to artificial intelligence. So can you give us some idea as far as what, and I know you can't talk about the whole continent of Africa, but from what you are exposed to, give us some idea as far as the breakthroughs that they're having over there in AI.
Yes, at the moment, a lot of it is to do with legislation. So there are privacy laws being passed. There are smart city initiatives going on, although there are problems with both of those. But a lot is to do with smart city initiatives as well as cybersecurity, and as well as just trying to create African solutions for Africans in that sense. So for South Africa, for example, is a huge outsourcing capital of the world. So my phone company here, if I phone their help center and I'm based in the UK, I get a South African accent. It's someone in Cape Town helping me out. And a lot of that is to do with people's ability to relate to different contexts, to different backgrounds, and be able to still conduct themselves appropriately. So I would say within AI, the value that the continent, or at least I should say, actually South Africa is bringing, is that impact of diversity and that impact of difference of opinion. And I think that's being mainly shown in terms of how of the different problems that are arising in terms of data privacy and the lack of strict privacy laws within certain countries that are then allowing certain manipulations to take place. So a lot of data colonialism, it's being referred to, where because of the lack of sort of privacy laws, there are companies that are using the continent to test certain materials because there's data available, and therefore not benefiting the continent and just taking the technology out. And one of those initiatives can sort of be seen in the Smart City Initiative in Zambia. I think it was about a year or two ago, where so all of a sudden in the city, cameras started popping up. And for smart city initiatives, you need cameras to be able to watch around and to use facial recognition technology to recognize citizens. And people weren't actually aware of what was going on. They didn't know why it was being built. They didn't know what it was for. So that lack of engagement between sort of civil society and those at the top has sort of created this disconnect, which can only really be filled with regulation and also with education. So I think that Africa serves as a good example of the issues that come without proper regulation and the importance of the diversity of thought. And that's sort of exemplified when people are looking at this smart city initiative and thinking, why do we need it? And I think that was the case in the Zambian context, for example. So I think diversity and use cases which are not effectively, which are showing that this is the problem if there are lax regulation, are two main initiatives going on. But otherwise, there are fantastic think tanks being developed, especially within North Africa as well. So Mauritania, bit of Tunisia as well, are producing fantastic insights into sort of the engineering side of AI. And I think there's a fantastic organization in Tunisia, which the name is escaping me at the moment, that's looking at different ways of engineering AI for the African context, which is also fascinating.
Yeah, so going from that, if we kind of step back, okay, you're bringing up the piracy and surveillance that these tech companies were coming in and utilizing all of this data that they would have access to in various parts of Africa. There's the bigger question of that the development of that technology, the AI in general, being utilized by more non-democratic countries. And with that, it's including those countries' values that's being incorporated. What's the concern that those non-democratic countries are going to be the main pushers and the developers of this kind of research and technology, and then they're able to export it everywhere? How do we address that?
Yeah, and I think, you touch on a debate between, the US potentially losing its leadership within the AI space that perhaps it's held for the last couple of years, and China, of course, wanting to be the AI superpower leader by 2030. It is a concerning time. It is concerning in the sense of, are we going to get the AI that we as a society within a global society can enjoy, or are we going to get a sort of AI that's developed in China that's perfect for the Chinese context that then is exported elsewhere, and that doesn't really work? And I think for me, the solution to that is, of course, innovation, it's getting perspectives out, it's getting conversations going, but it's also the safeguards in place. So context is always key within AI. If you're going to develop an AI within a certain context, in a micro context, let's say like the context of a city in, let's say, China, it is not going to work in Johannesburg. It is not going to work in London. So I find it difficult to think of a global AI that's going to be exported everywhere, and that's just how it's going to be, and every sort of AI technology is going to say made in China. I find that difficult to believe. The issue becomes when almost the AI is not being exported, but it's used by China in different parts of the world. So China's using the data from Africa. If this was the case, I have no, it's just a sort of thought experiment. Let's say China used data from South Africa or from Angola to fuel its AI to then use it for whatever means. That would be the issue. I don't think it's going to be that China wins a race and then exports its AI, and that's how it's going to be. I think there's AI for particular contexts being generated throughout the world. And I think from my research and from my looking into the AI space, context is key. And you can see that within autonomous vehicles, that vehicles being able to drive within California are not going to be able to drive in the bustling streets of Mumbai. Those are going to be heavily contextual technologies, and I think that's going to be the same with AI systems. However, if those systems are more so based in an algorithmic form and are more so sort of exponential in that sense in terms of how they grow, that is going to be an issue. But I still think that context will be key, and the safeguards in place are going to be what's important. How do we manage any fallout from AI, and how do we appropriately have conversations and almost processes to which we deal with these fallouts?
Okay, so as an ethicist, how do you make that argument to governments, organizations, companies about the ethics of that technology when most people look at that as something that's going to be constraining to innovation, is going to prevent them from being able to utilize it in the various domains they want to utilize it in? So how do you make that argument as an
So
ethicist?
yeah, so as an AI ethicist, to quote Olivia Gamblin in her paper, What It Takes to Be an AI Ethicist, or the titles around that kind of phrasing, it's a very lonely job. At times, you will be the only person disagreeing or wanting to put a break on something that's earning the company a lot of money, or that is proving very beneficial to a large amount of people, but also is still harming some. And my question would be almost, why innovate at the expense of another? So when we look at AI that's moving at a million miles an hour anyways, we can make progress without moving a million miles an hour. And there are solutions that AI can solve, but there are also problems that we won't even know that these solutions will bring. And sort of case in point is when Starbucks used a automated shift organizer, and it basically was meant to easily automate their shift giving system, allow people less stress about organizing shift or changing, and therefore to save time. But what that meant is that sort of single mothers were being given 8 a.m. shifts, which meant that they had to drop off their kids at child daycare at, let's say, 6 a.m. to be able to get to work, which wasn't possible. So this automation has not helped, but it's produced this sort of unintended consequence of allocating early shifts to those who don't deserve it. And this is an example of the broken part fallacy, which is where AI almost is often thrown at the problem to fix a particular issue. So a particular broken part, whereas the problem in fact is systemic. So
Yes.
within the Starbucks example, the problem perhaps not is the AI that you then tweak or that you throw more technology at it and then you fix, but it's more so the affordable housing or the lack of it near child daycare centers. So I think when we look at AI, we need to be aware of the context that it's within, like I've mentioned, as well as the expense of innovation and the expense of making progress so quickly. Amazon has recognized this with their facial recognition system recognition, which they've done a 2-year moratorium on since 2020, in order to try and get the regulation in place before it is released. And I think that it's a case in point of saying that at times technology does move too fast. So when I'm looking at a company and I ask this question, why innovate at the expense of another, I almost will follow that up by saying these technologies have real effects. So the Starbucks example, the facial recognition example, such as Joy Bolamwini's study of at MIT in 2018 of the effects of facial recognition technology in terms of inaccuracy on African American women compared to white males. And what might happen is that the company comes back to me and says, no, this algorithm is 90% accurate and it's neutral, it's technology, it's not a human. So I would then almost reply saying, okay, there is such a thing called the 90% fallacy, which is where people assume, if the percentage is in the 90% range, it's then 100% accurate, which isn't the case. So like 95% is assumed to be 100% accurate. However, if you're applying this 90% accurate technology to 2 million people, that's still going to be 2,000, 20,000 people that are affected, which is a lot. That's filling up more than a medium-sized soccer stadium. That's filling up more than a large amount of buses. So in that case, it's to be aware of that as well. And the argument that technology is neutral is something that we are evidently seeing is not the case. Yeah. So although it is a very lonely job, I think there are definitely a lot of use cases to be used and a lot of empirical data to be used, or almost to say that while we're making progress, we need to make progress in the right way.
Yes. So let me go back to some earlier questions, because we was on a roll and I just couldn't resist forging ahead. Okay, so what is your educational background?
Yeah, so after high school, I studied philosophy at the University of Exeter, and I minored in Spanish as well. So I did 2 years at the University of Exeter, which is in the UK, and there's a nice smiley picture of me on my graduation day, 30 degrees in a 3-piece suit. So I was very, very hot. And I did my 3rd year abroad in Spain, in Granada, which was an interesting year to pick. That was 2020 to 21. So I had the pandemic and I had Brexit in the same year. So I still had a good time nonetheless. And then I came back, finished my final year, came out with a first class, which I was extremely proud of. And then I also secured my place at Cambridge in their part-time masters in AI ethics and society. So I've just started that course. I had my first residential the week before, or almost 2 weeks ago, I should say. And now I'm continuing on with that for the next 2 years. So I did 4 years at Exeter and I'll be 2 years at Cambridge at the very least. And there's a nice smiley photo of most of the cohort there at our first residential in Cambridge.
Wow. And you worked at the Montreal AI Ethics Institute. How did you end up there?
Yeah, it's a nice story actually. So almost a positive story that comes out of the pandemic, which I count myself very lucky to be able to tell. So in 2019, I applied to their internship in the summer. They just started out in 2018, so they were relatively new. And then I didn't get in, so I said, okay, fine. So I followed them on Twitter, kept up with their posts, and I made sure to be able to read what they were putting out as well. And they were having events, but they were all in person and in Montreal. So I was in the UK, I wasn't able to attend. Then what happened with the pandemic is that they put all their in-person events online. And so I attended those when I could. The co-founders were still there and still running the sessions. And I was that annoying student who volunteered to do everything and always had a question and put my hand up. And eventually I sent Abhishek, who's the person in the middle of your photo there with the May background, a message on Twitter to say I wanted to get more involved, whether it was just to take notes or just to learn. And he said, okay, let's have a call. And I sent my CV, we had a call, and then we went from there. I've been on the team ever since. So I started off as an AI ethics researcher, and now I am partnerships manager. So I've been there since June 2020.
So what's a partnership manager?
Yeah, so I handle any external contributions or collaborations that we do. So any events you want to put on, any sort of collaborations we want to get involved in. I help with the logistics. I sometimes speak at the events as well. And then I also write for our weekly newsletter as well. So I write pieces for that. So I handle almost the external stuff, the relationships that we have, as well as writing for our newsletter.
Could you give our attendees some idea what the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, what do they do? What are they about?
Yeah, with pleasure. So our slogan is democratizing AI ethics literacy. So we want to make the AI space accessible. We want to make it a place where people can engage with the material, read it, and have a voice. So we sort of do that in two different ways. We have a communities branch, which is where we run our events. We host speakers. We want people to get involved and to have a voice within these events. So we do usually a flipped classroom model. So our next event is a panel, but we usually do a flipped classroom model where people, attendees do the readings beforehand. They come to the event, we have a quick introduction, and then we go into breakout rooms to discuss. And then after that discussion, we come back to the main room and feedback off each other. And that's where we want to engage in this dialogue with people all over the world and of all different varieties and involvements within the AI space. And then we also have our content. So we publish weekly newsletters, which include research summaries. So we take a paper, we distill it, we shorten it, and you can read the full paper if you have time, but then we provided a research summary for you. And this eventually contributes to our biannual State of AI Ethics report, which gives you all the latest and greatest developments within the space in nice little chapters. So it is, a large document, 200 pages, but they're broken up into chapters and they're broken up into article summaries from that week, as well as research summaries, as well as column pieces from all sorts of experts within the space as well. So we do our two different branches in order to try and make the space accessible for others.
Okay, and how does that report that you guys produce, how does that compare to other reports from like World Economic Forum, Deloitte AI Institute? They produce an AI dossier. Stanford produces a AI index report. So because you guys, your focus is the ethics, how do you incorporate that in your report, making it different from everybody else? How is it different?
Yeah, so we focus on the ethics, but we also have focus on the computing and the engineering side as well. So we have chapters on privacy, we have chapters on disinformation as well. And I think it's the accessibility of it. So we're not writing formal reports that you might see from Deloitte or you might see principles from PwC, but we're writing our material not to show you what we've done, but to allow you a seat at the table. And I think that's the main difference. In the sense, you can read a Deloitte report and see what's being done and get some stats. But I think for us, you're reading to enrich yourself and to access different material written in different and accessible ways. I think that's the key difference. We're focusing on the everyday reader and the person who wants to get into the space, as well as the experts. We have a range of audience, and we also want to cater to that. So I think the accessibility, as well as the focus, is slightly different.
Okay, and something I meant to ask you a little earlier. I heard you say your dad had a tech company. What did he do?
It's a good question, and he has told me so many times that hopefully I'm going to do it justice. Effectively, he worked in electronic billing. So he was one of the first people in South Africa to use email, and he used that to basically form encrypted and secure receipts and transactions between banks, between companies, and to handle that. So he handled all sort of the email systems that were sent by banks, and then the receipts that were sent, and also you would be able to receive these kinds of receipts and bank statements securely through using my dad's sort of software. And as a result, he expanded that when we moved to the UK. So a tech company in terms of electronic billing using email is what I'm going to say.
Okay, Cameron had a question he wanted to ask.
Hi, Connor. Just going back to a point that you were making about our assumptions about AI systems being neutral, and you finding out that they aren't really neutral and that you have to consider the context. I want to ask, how do you even get to something called ethical AI in situations where the companies and the corporations and the organizations that are developing and devising these systems are not ethical, or they're immoral, or the developers that are developing the programs or software or collecting the data, they're not ethical and maybe not moral either. So how do you get to something called ethical AI when many of the organizations, especially the large ones, have so many unethical cultures? How do you even get to that concept?
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. And I would say it's accountability. I think it's holding these tech companies accountable in the sense of that, okay, we are empowered enough, able enough, and in tune enough to say that this is not okay, this is not ethical, which I think beforehand, without for example, GDPR or privacy laws within the EU, the AI Act that's now being passed as well, I don't think we had a benchmark. I don't think there was any sort of consensus on what should actually be adhered to. There was lots of finger pointing, but there was no foundation to expose that. So I think as accountability, that can come through audit, but it can also come through education. And I think that's where we at May are trying to get to. We're trying to educate civil society and trying to increase AI ethics literacy in order to better increase the chance of holding tech companies accountable and pulling up mistakes. So you look in the Zambia example we mentioned, that's where tech literacy is needed. People need to know why these things are being built and how they're being passed and what they're used for. And I think that's what we're trying to get with the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, to try and bring about that ability to hold companies accountable and to be able to engage in the space in that way.
So one follow on that, and I get that, holding them accountable for the technology, but that's kind of like dealing with the leaves and not the tree. Why isn't there an approach to just go after the organization and the company and the individual, period? As far as their ethics, their unethical corporate cultures, corporate goals. The AI technology is just that's a small artifact, and basically residue of whatever the company, organization, or individual's goals are. And I get what you're saying in terms of being accountable, but it seems like you would be chasing these organizations and companies that are just trying to, once you plug up one hole, they'll find another one. And once you curtail this behavior, they quickly find another behavior. And if you don't get to the root of the problem, which is the unethical environment that those programs run in, then it seems like you'll be always chasing, you'll never solve that problem.
Now, I like the direction you're taking. I think you hit on a very key issue, and that's the valuation of ethics and AI and ethics within the AI space. So within these companies, if you're going to hit it at the core, you need to have an empowered AI ethicist, and you need to have almost a team of AI ethicists. So there's a fantastic AI maturity model that Kathy Baxter at Salesforce has produced, which shows how to disseminate AI ethics throughout the corporation. And she does a step-by-step process, and effectively it's like planting a little seed in lots of different departments and watching them bloom into nice, beautiful AI ethics flowers throughout that culture. And then within that culture, you get to the core of the issue, where we need to have a valuation of AI ethics. We need to basically feel empowered that the AI ethicist is not just a centerpiece for display, which my colleague Massa Sweden gets at very, very well. In her piece is as a PR stunt. And she sort of just talks about how without actually empowering the person in that position, there's no point in having that. You could just almost, stick that kind of sticker on a teddy bear, put it in a board meeting, and it's the same thing. So we need to have that kind of evaluation, but also respect for that position. And I think at that point where you start almost changing that company culture to try and shift to not just being all about the answer, but being about having the answer through the right process. And I think that's by planting those seeds in those different departments. And as you say, Cameron, you'll start to change the tree rather than just sweep away the leaves.
There you go.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We want to end the interview part of today's talk. Fantastic, Connor. And we want to end it with this 30 seconds call and response. And then after that, we can open it up to any questions out there. So we're going to try this and see if it works.
All right, rock and roll.
Okay, so here we go, 30 seconds. I'm gonna give you a word, you give me a response, and hopefully we get through this in 30 seconds, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay, biases.
Something to focus on, something to acknowledge that is a serious issue.
Okay, control problem.
That's something that's coming out between the West and the East, but we need to focus on the micro side rather than the macro side first.
Okay, privacy.
Extremely important, but there is a trade-off, the Pareto principle, between privacy or better AI, and there needs to be a way to try and merge the two.
Power balance.
Very, very delicate and very easy to upset. So there needs to be conversations around how best to move around the power within AI.
Okay. Ownership, intellectual property.
Very, very interesting debate, especially around whether AI can be creative or not. So that's one to watch out for the future.
Okay, last one, environmental impact.
Very important to focus on. Not enough companies are evaluating it, using too many big data and big computing power to produce the carbon emissions. So something to watch out and also prioritize in the future.
Okay, great. I think we beat 30 seconds, I think. Okay, let's open it up to the attendees to see if there are any questions out there.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I want to ask, is it that this AI is not currently using security measures, especially in the financial aspects of our daily lives? Because I still get to find out that people's funds still get to be sabotaged, whereby their measures from their credit card and this thing is being compromised. And I know that one of the basics in which most of these credit cards are being built is the technology of AI. So I want to ask, is it that the AI is not really in play now, or because the level of fraud keep increasing, and in light of that, it causes reputational damage for organization and loss of wealth, loss of income for the individual as a corporate? Thank you.
Okay,
No worries. Thank you, Kazim. It's a good question. And while financial AI is not my area of expertise, I would say that having fraud is a tough gig for a human. It's a tough gig for an AI. And I think damaging the reputation of that company only gets worse if you're trying to automate the process through AI. So AI is definitely a strong player within the financial services, especially simply opening my bank app. I use facial recognition technology, which is, of course, a form of AI, and that is being extremely advanced and being also extremely secure. But even then, there's still fraud happening. So I think it can relate interestingly to a law that came out in California, which is called the Bolstering AI or Bolstering Online Transparency Act, which came out in 2019. Effectively, it's a chatbot law where any chatbot used within the state of California has to self-identify itself in order not to manipulate or almost catfish a human agent by pretending to be a human. So I think within financial services, within AI, a lot of fraud perhaps could happen through an AI being able to fool a human that it is another human operator and generate that kind of trust. And perhaps that education needs to be in place in order to avoid that. But also these systems are suffering perhaps from a lack of quality data in order to decipher what is fraud and what isn't. And perhaps pirates or fraudsters are being better able at gaming that algorithm. So whether it is an automated system or it is a human, fraud is going to damage the reputation of the company. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Because I still found out that in the United States, most times when you want to consummate a transaction with the aid of your credit card, they seems not to take much preference into the two-factor authentication, which I think is very, very important because they actually encourage as well when you are trying to make payment to a third party and the representative of the third party is trying to tell you to divulge your information on the credit card so that they can consummate the transaction for you. I think from my own angle, it's a kind of a security breach. And if lapses, sorry, and if it is not properly looked into, I think this will still continue. And in the process whereby I try to question one or two persons that I've met thinking to I'll try to kind of interrogate them on why that is it. So I was told that the Americans generally they actually prefer to be vulnerable than to go through stress of yeah. So I don't know, but it's a very good one. Your response, I think I'm going to take it back to my research and I'm going to discuss it with my team. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, we have a question from, I hope I pronounced the person's name correctly, Adity. The question is, do companies think about the environmental impact of raw material extractions from building machines?
Yeah, a great question. And I think my answer will be not enough. For those who haven't seen Kate Crawford, who has had a slightly different, slightly sort of tainted reputation recently within the AI space, but her piece on like the life cycle of AI or atlas of AI or around that is very, very interesting. It sort of takes displays on a map along with her co-author the journey of Alexa and how that came about. So the extraction of the lithium and the for the batteries and the carbon to make certain sort of CPUs is definitely coming from the earth. So a very interesting take on the phrase like data is the new oil that I saw is that it's not actually a good comparison because it makes it seem as if data is like this natural product that we find in the ground where it's not. So almost viewing AI within this natural state is important, and we need to be careful about how we use it as well. So the actual extraction of lithium and carbon and the emissions that are put out by these machines is very, very important. And then we need to make sure also not to refer to data as a natural resource as well, because it isn't. It is generated through in the technology realm. It's not found in the ground. So I would say that companies don't think about this impact enough, even though it's very clear to see and it's very easily traceable in terms of how the AI, what is needed to build AI is taken from the ground, and it's very measurable, to at least to a limited extent or to a certain extent, the impact of this AI and computing and the electricity that it uses as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes.
I just wanted to, I asked the question. You got my name, okay. I wanted to, I missed the person's name you mentioned, someone who's working in this area. I missed the name.
Okay, I'll write it in the chat now.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so Kate Crawford, and she also has a co-author whose name is escaping me at the moment, but I do want to credit him that he also wrote the piece. I think it's called, if you search Kate Crawford, like life cycle of an AI, and then or Alexa,
okay,
then it should come up.
All right, thank you very much. That's helpful.
No, my pleasure.
Okay, thank you. I had another question. Your quote, I asked you for a quote, and I kind of wanted you to give us some idea of what you meant. When it comes to AI, the more we consult, the greater the success.
Indeed. So from my work within the space, I found that at times the problems that are coming from AI systems are just, they are not adjusted appropriately to their system that they are, to their context that they're trying to be applied in. And one way to think of it is also blanket statements. So saying like everyone values AI or everyone is tech savvy or everyone has Facebook. Not everyone has Facebook. Not everyone likes technology. Not everyone knows how to work Zoom. So when we consult and actually realize that this is the case, when we start to consult and see what the real issues that people care about are, the greater we are able to tailor our AI and better able to tailor it to the needs and wants of the people that are effectively going to be operating within the same space as a technology. So I think the more experiences that we take on board, the better we are able to adjust our AI to its best performance.
Yes, thank you. That's excellent, excellent answer. And I think that's an excellent way to end our 60 minutes presentation. Connor, I would have to say you have been excellent and very informed, and you did really an excellent job. And I think we're going to be have a great advantage and benefit from you being in this space and studying and have so much to contribute, because we definitely need bright, considerate individuals in this area. And I like your philosophy as far as context. I think that is the one thing me and Cameron have talked about this a lot, is really lacking is context. AI is within a system. It's not just some floating technology, as you said, you just tack it on and everything's better. It has to be within a system. It has to be within a society. It has to be in the culture of a company.
It's not created in a vacuum.
That's right. It's not created in a vacuum. So that is just phenomenal. And we need to hear more of that. If I missed any questions out there, if there's some short ones, I'm looking at the chat. I don't see anything. So we're going to go ahead and end it. And again, thank you so much. It's been very enriching. I hope everyone got a lot from that. Anybody want to make any closing comments?
Good job, man.
Yeah, I hear somebody talk. Who was this talking?
I think it's Kazim.
Okay, I wanted to ask them for the Northeast Ohio ACM. I don't know. I want to be a member of this group. I'm currently at Kent. I don't know how I can get more reach outs. So this is my first time I've attended this meeting. So I want to know how I can actually be part of the society there.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close it for this event, and then we'll talk to you one-on-one, Kazim, okay?
Thank you.
Hold on. All right, thanks again, Connor. We're going to be uploading this, and everyone that has RSVP, we're going to send you a link to the video so you can watch it at your leisure. And Connor, we're going to send that to you as well. I know some other people wanted to attend and they wanted to see it, but really, I
did have one other question. I'm sorry, I was trying to fix my mic. Is it possible, Connor, if you could link us up to that report?
Yeah, which one?
To share. You mentioned the report that you guys created.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I don't think I can leave the Zoom, unfortunately, because it's recording. So what I'll do is I'll type in montrealethics.ai. So that's our website. And then it's called, if you just search on there, State of AI Ethics Report, you'll have several editions on there of all the latest and greatest developments within the AI of when that report was published. And then if you want, you can also subscribe to our newsletter, which is called The Brief. So if you search The Brief and Montreal AI Ethics, you'll then be able to join us there as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks again, Connor. Thank you everyone for logging on and participating. I'm sure you heard a lot today, very valuable information, very encouraging to hear someone talk about AI the way Connor is presenting himself. So just highly appreciated. Thank you. Thanks everyone for participating. Thanks for the
My pleasure.
great questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. My pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Cameron. And thank you, NEOACM. I hope to be back soon.
Yes, definitely.